It was a warm summer day, and Jason Statham arrived at the local soccer field where his friends were waiting for him. He planned to just relax and spend some time, but then he noticed a group of kids trying to practice under the guidance of a coach. However, what he saw wasn't training, it was torment. The coach, a tall man with a stern expression, was showing no mercy to his pupils. He shouted at them, made them jump over barriers, run without rest, and every time someone made a mistake, a new stream of insults followed. The children's faces were filled with despair, exhaustion, and obvious fear. Jason felt his heart tighten seeing this scene. "Not like that. You need to be faster," the coach yelled when one of the boys stumbled. Jason couldn't stand by. His instincts told him that he needed to act. Jason watched from a distance as the coach continued yelling at the kids, making them jump over barriers and perform physical exercises to the point of exhaustion. Every word from the coach was filled with irritation, and every demand was a harsh punishment. The boys and girls who couldn't keep up with the load were losing confidence, their faces growing more and more despondent. Jason felt his chest tighten. He knew this wasn't going to end well. "I can't just watch this," he thought. He wasn't the type of person who could stay indifferent in a situation like this. Jason approached the field with determination in his eyes. His steps were confident, but in his head the thought pulsed. "What can I do?" He stopped at the edge of the field, and when the coach noticed him approaching, he briefly stopped his shouting. Jason looked at the coach, then at the kids, who were clearly not being helped. He realized that intervention was necessary. When the coach was about to say something again, Jason was already next to him. Calmly, without aggression but firmly, he said, "This isn't working. Do you see that they're scared? You're the one scaring them. You're not a coach, you're a tormentor." The coach tried to respond, but Jason continued, not giving him a chance to speak. "Look at their eyes, at their faces. You've broken them. You can shout and make them jump, but that won't make them stronger. They need support, not fear." He was straightforward, but there was no malice in his voice. It was more of a warning, an invitation for everything to change. The coach frowned, preparing to argue, but something in Jason's tone made him fall silent. He felt that opposing him now wouldn't be the right decision. Jason simply walked over to the group of children, who were still watching the scene with confusion and anxiety. Without saying a word, Jason picked up the ball that was lying nearby and started dribbling it across the field. He didn't try to shout or dominate. On the contrary, he showed how important technique, control, and support were. He passed the ball to his imaginary partner, made precise feints, and then suddenly stopped, looking at the children. "Let's try together. You're not weak. You just didn't know how to do this." The children, who had been frightened and confused, started cautiously approaching him. Jason continued to show them how to move smoothly, how to feel the ball, how not to fear making mistakes. Every time someone made a mistake, he didn't scold them. He just smiled and said, "Good, let's try again." They began repeating the movements, shyly but with enthusiasm. It was something new for them, the feeling that mistakes weren't scary. Jason didn't demand immediate success. He simply taught them to be confident in themselves. After a few minutes of training, the children began to notice changes. One of the boys, who had been afraid to even run before, started moving more confidently across the field. He wasn't a professional yet, but he felt like he could. Meanwhile, the coach, standing aside, watched what was happening. His gaze was initially full of dissatisfaction, but then he noticed how the children, following Jason's example, started smiling, their movements becoming more coordinated. Even those who usually sat in the corner and didn't want to participate began to show interest. Jason knew this was just the beginning, but his plan was starting to work. He encouraged the children, laughed with them, and sometimes joked. But most importantly, he didn't destroy their confidence, he helped strengthen it. The coach was still standing aside. He was trying to understand what was happening. His words no longer held the same authority as before. The children, who had once looked at him with respect, were now acting differently. They weren't afraid. Moreover, they were starting to enjoy the game. Why have they suddenly become so confident? The coach thought. He was no longer sure of his methods, although he had once believed them to be the only right way. But now, when the children were beginning to enjoy the process rather than fear punishment, the coach realized something was wrong with his approach. Jason continued to lead by example. He dribbled the ball, scored goals in the empty net, and said, "In soccer, it's not just about the result. What matters more is how you play and how you feel." As Jason continued to train the children, the coach watched from a distance. He felt his control over the situation begin to fade. Every word Jason spoke, every gesture seemed natural and right. The children began to move with confidence they had never had before. A boy named Max, who always sat in the corner, afraid to make a mistake, was now calmly dribbling the ball across the field, easily navigating the barriers. His face was filled with determination. Jason noticed this and approached Max, quietly saying, "Good job, but don't forget, the most important thing is to believe in yourself. You can do more." Jason's words inspired Max, and he continued to move across the field, not caring about his mistakes. Every time the ball slipped away, he returned to his task with complete resolve. Max was not afraid of mistakes. He felt that it was okay. Meanwhile, the coach stood in the shadows and watched. He saw the children beginning to change. This wasn't a coincidence. This was a real transformation. He felt his own confidence start to melt away. He couldn't understand why the children were now playing with more confidence than ever before. Jason continued to train the children, and they began showing amazing results. Now they weren't afraid of mistakes, and their successes were becoming more and more noticeable. A girl named Sarah, who had barely touched the ball before, was now skillfully passing it to her teammates. She began to understand how important it was not to fear failure. "Great, Sarah. See how much easier everything gets when you're not afraid," Jason said, encouraging her. Sarah smiled. She couldn't believe how quickly she had learned to control the ball, and it gave her strength. Meanwhile, other children were also beginning to show improved results. One boy, Jake, who had always been shy and unsure, suddenly performed an incredible trick that drew cheers from his teammates. He had never imagined he could play like that. He caught himself thinking that he felt like part of the team, not just a player trying not to disappoint the coach. "Well done, Jake. Keep it up." Jason praised him, and Jake felt on top of the world with happiness. The coach continued to watch. His face grew more thoughtful. He couldn't help but notice how outdated his methods were. The children were no longer afraid. They were enjoying the game and playing better than ever. Something was happening that made them unlock their potential. Suddenly, the coach realized that his approach would no longer work unless he changed something within himself. Jason knew that the children still didn't fully understand how great their achievements were. They were beginning to believe in themselves, but hadn't yet realized how much they had changed. He decided to take a break and talk to them. "Listen to me," he said, gathering all the children around. "What you just did is incredible. You've started believing in yourselves, and that's the secret to success. It doesn't matter how many mistakes you make. The important thing is to keep moving forward. Every mistake is an opportunity to become better." The children listened to him in silence, understanding that he was right. Their inner state was starting to change. They were no longer afraid of being imperfect. There was a genuine desire to work and improve in their eyes. The coach stood off to the side, rubbing his chin. He saw how Jason truly knew how to inspire these kids, and slowly began to realize that perhaps he himself needed to learn that. In the next training session, the coach, now reflecting more on what had happened, decided to try a different approach. He began speaking to the children more gently, almost for the first time in a long while, praising them for small victories. But something still felt off. He sensed that he lacked what Jason had, sincerity and simplicity in his approach. "You're playing well," the coach said to the children, "but you need to work harder." The children became a bit wary, sensing that his words didn't sound quite like Jason's. But the coach continued, "We all make mistakes, and that's okay. The important thing is not to give up." For the coach, this was a step forward. He began to realize that it was important to support the team, not just demand the impossible from them. He was no longer the coach who only shouted and humiliated. He was beginning to understand that motivation was the key to success, not fear. A month passed and the team began showing real results. In their first match after the changes, they won against a team that was considered the tournament favorite. The children, who once feared making mistakes, now played with confident team coordination. Jason was nearby but no longer intervened in the process. He simply watched, proud of the fact that the children had overcome their fears on their own and had learned to be real players. The coach stood next to him, and there was a gleam in his eyes. He understood that it was with this approach that they could achieve true victories. He turned to Jason. "You were right. I saw it, but I needed to understand it for myself." After the match, the coach and the children gathered on the field to talk. "We all won," the coach said. "But it's not just a victory in the game. We've won over ourselves. We've started trusting each other and believing in ourselves." The children cheered joyfully, realizing that their efforts had been rewarded. They had learned to work as a team despite their mistakes and shortcomings. After the coach finished his speech, the team gathered in a circle on the field. The children laughed and joked, hugging each other, celebrating not just the victory but their internal transformation. It wasn't just a win in the game. It was a victory over their own doubts, fears, and insecurities. They had learned to trust each other, to work as a single unit, and to accept their mistakes. Max, still one of the quietest on the team, was special today. Not only did he score the decisive goal, but he also felt like part of the team. His eyes shone with pride. Sarah, who had always worried about every mistake she made, now confidently approached the ball without looking back. She knew everyone would support her, even if she didn't get it right the first time. But the coach, standing aside and watching the children celebrate, felt a mix of emotions. On one hand, he was proud of his pupils, but on the other, doubts lingered. He still felt that his old methods had played a part in the success they had just experienced. Was all of this due to his changes, or perhaps despite them? The next morning, the coach went to the field first to reflect on the recent victory. He stood in the same spot where, not long ago, he had shouted at the players, demanding perfection and discipline. Now, all of that seemed distant and unnatural. He understood that the victory had come, not only because of the efforts on the field, but also because of how the team had changed. They had started to trust each other, to believe in their abilities, not fearing mistakes. But at the same time, the coach couldn't shake the feeling that it had all been too easy. As a coach, he wasn't yet sure that this new approach would yield long-term results. They already know how to trust. But what comes next, he whispered to himself, replaying the events in his mind again and again. Deep down, the coach still couldn't confidently say that he had fully embraced Jason's new methods. He still felt the old need for strict control, for tough demands. But now, looking at the children who had grown over the past period, he began to question the correctness of his approach. After several days of reflection, the coach finally realized that he couldn't continue down the old path. He couldn't ignore the fact that a real transformation had taken place, and that this transformation was the result of trust and team spirit. He felt that if he continued following his old methods, he would not only lose the team but also destroy the confidence they had just gained. The next day, when the coach gathered the children on the field, he decided to speak openly with them and say what he had been hiding from himself until now. "Kids, I want you to know," he began, not hiding his vulnerability, "that I'm changing. I used to believe that I could achieve victory only through harshness and control. but you've shown me that success comes not through fear, but through confidence in yourselves and in each other." The children, listening to him, felt the change not only in his words but also in his gaze. This was the first time the coach had acknowledged his mistakes and realized that their efforts weren't tied to his harsh demands. After the candid conversation with the team, the coach began actively implementing changes in his approach. He focused more on maintaining the team's morale and strengthening trust between the players. He started shouting less and talking to the children more, giving them the opportunity to take initiative on the field. The coach also began to realize that success wasn't just about victories. It was about the process of self-discovery for each player. He started to appreciate their efforts and began recognizing every, even the smallest, step forward. In every mistake, he now saw an opportunity for growth. Lucas, who had rarely played before, now confidently moved into attack, knowing that the coach and the team would support him if he made a mistake. He became an important part of the team, and his confidence grew every day. Weeks passed, and the coach noticed how the team was changing. The children were no longer afraid of making mistakes, and each of them began to show their best qualities. They became stronger not only as players, but also as people. During one of the training sessions, the coach said, "Now I see how important each of you is. You're not just members of the team, you're people who trust each other. And it's only because of that that we can get better." The children looked at the coach with respect. They saw how he had changed and began to trust him even more. Even Jason Statham, who had been silently observing all this time, understood that the coach had become not just their mentor, but a true friend. With each passing day, the coach increasingly realized how much his approach had changed. He trusted the children more and allowed them to develop without imposing strict demands on them. But his inner doubts didn't disappear. Despite the progress, he couldn't shake the feeling that if he hadn't been so strict, the team wouldn't have been able to succeed. One day, in a moment of reflection, he approached Jason, who was watching the practice from the bench. The coach stood nearby, watching the children play with full confidence, and began the conversation he had been postponing for so long. "I'm still not sure I can fully let go of the old methods," the coach said, not hiding his concern. "Sometimes I feel like my strictness helps them become strong. If I stop demanding that from them, they'll start relaxing." Jason listened carefully before responding. "You see how they're playing, right? Look at their eyes. See how much more confident they've become. That's because you taught them not to fear mistakes. You gave them room to grow. That's strength." The coach thought for a moment. He understood that Jason was right. But old habits were strong, and he constantly wanted to return to what seemed safer to him, to strict demands and harshness. But he already knew that this was no longer what his team needed. The coach stood at the edge of the field, watching them play. He realized that each of these kids had achieved much more than he had expected. Max, Sarah, Lucas, they had all become not only better players, but also better people who could offer support to one another in the toughest situations. The day of the important match arrived. The team was about to face a strong opponent, one that was considered the tournament favorite. Despite their confidence, the children were still nervous. The coach noticed how they prepared, how they considered their strategies, and how each of them felt responsible for their team. "Remember, it's not just about winning, but about showing how we work as one," the coach said before the match. The children listened carefully to him, and although the tension could be felt in the air, their attitude toward the game was different. They were no longer afraid of making mistakes. They knew that the coach would be there to support them, and that each of them could count on the team's support. Jason Statham, who stood to the side, saw how focused the children were on the game. He felt that the coach and the team were ready for the challenge, and perhaps at that moment they had reached their peak. The match began with intense pressure from the opponents. The rivals immediately started attacking, not giving the coach's team a chance to relax. But the children didn't panic. They held back the attacks, and their teamwork on the field became more and more coordinated. Max made the decision not to fear mistakes and played with full self-respect, passing the ball to other players, which helped the team stay calm. Sarah made several decisive passes, and Lucas, with his confident defense, didn't let the opponents break through. They displayed true teamwork, not because of the fear of punishment, but due to confidence in their own abilities and trust in each other. In the final minutes of the match, with the score tied, the team made the decisive move. Max, receiving the ball, dribbled past several defenders and made an accurate pass to Sarah, who scored the winning goal. The team erupted in joy. It was their first winning goal in such an important match. After the victory, the coach gathered the children on the field to thank them. "We didn't just win on the field," he said, looking at their happy faces. "We won over ourselves. We learned to work as a team, trust each other, and not fear mistakes. That's the real victory." The children hugged and laughed. They felt proud not only for winning, but for overcoming their fears and doubts. They knew that now they were one united whole, and that their support for each other had become their true strength. Jason stood nearby, smiling, understanding that this victory was the result of not only physical training, but also the psychological transformation of the children. He was proud to have helped them discover this path. After the match, the coach and Jason talked about the future. They understood that the victory was just the beginning. Now the coach knew that the key to success wasn't strictness, but support, trust, and confidence in one's abilities. He also understood that with each passing day, his role as a mentor would change, and this would require even more work on himself. "You were right," the coach said to Jason. "I've just realized that what matters isn't the result, but the journey. We've become better not only as a team, but also as people." Jason smiled, knowing that the coach had truly become the mentor the team deserved. Weeks had passed since that important victory, and the coach began to realize that the changes in the team weren't just about the game. He noticed how the children had become more confident, not only on the field but also in life. Many of them had started showing leadership qualities that had not been visible before. Max was no longer the quiet player in the corner of the field. He had become one of those who lifted the team's spirit in difficult moments. Sarah had stopped worrying about every mistake, and her calmness had passed on to the entire team. The coach understood that it was his job to create space for their growth, not just demand results. He felt his own perspective on the training process changing. He no longer sought mistakes. He looked for moments to praise the children, to show them they were on the right path. But with this change, the coach still felt like he was on the edge, between the old and new approach. As soon as the situation became tense, old habits would surface in his mind, demanding control and strict requirements. He understood that he needed to keep working on himself to avoid falling back into his old ways. Despite the confidence they had gained, the team faced a real challenge in the next tournament. It was a match against a team that had been undefeated for several years. The children, though confident, felt the pressure. The first half was tense, and their opponents began to dominate the field. The coach noticed how Lucas, who had always been one of the most confident players, started to get nervous. He kept making mistakes, rushing, and couldn't focus. The coach realized that this was an important moment to give Lucas support, not make him feel guilty for his mistakes. He approached him, spoke softly and confidently. "You're not alone. Remember, mistakes are part of the journey. We all make mistakes. Let's go back to what we do best, being a team and supporting each other." Lucas nodded, and despite his nerves, he felt he wasn't alone in this game. He took the ball and tried again, now with confidence, knowing the team was by his side. In the second half, the game unexpectedly changed. The team began to rally, and each player felt they couldn't let each other down. Lucas's mistakes and those of others became moments for growth, not obstacles. Max, with a precise pass, led the team into attack, and Sarah, once again not worrying about possible mistakes, scored an important goal that restored confidence to the whole team. The coach stood on the bench, looking at his players. He saw how they had begun to support each other, without fear of their opponents. They weren't afraid to lose. They were only afraid of not playing at their full potential. This was the team's victory, and the coach understood that they had reached a new level. "This is our game," he said to himself, realizing that the team was now ready for any challenge. After the match, the coach and the children gathered on the field. The team won the match, but what was much more important was how they had done it. It wasn't just about winning, it was about how they supported each other during tough moments, how they worked through their mistakes and didn't let them break their confidence. The coach approached the children and said, "Today, you didn't just win the match, you won yourselves. We all won because we became a team. What matters is that you started trusting not just me, but each other. That's how growth continues." Jason Statham stood aside, watching the children. He knew that this team was now on a new level. He was proud of how the coach had started supporting the players and teaching them to work together. It was clear to him that the coach was no longer the same as before. He had become a true mentor, not demanding the impossible from the children, but helping them uncover their strengths. "This is your success," Jason said to the children as he approached them. "You showed not just strength on the field, but strength of spirit. Keep it up." The coach understood that the work with the team had only just begun. The successes they had achieved were just the first step. He knew that there would be new challenges, new opponents, and new mistakes that they would need to overcome. But now, thanks to his changed philosophy and new approach, the coach felt that the team was ready for anything. "We haven't reached everything yet," the coach said to the children, "but what we've already achieved is a great step forward. We can and will move forward, supporting each other." The children enthusiastically supported him. They knew that no matter what difficulties lay ahead, the most important thing was that they could face them together. Soon, the team began to win matches. It wasn't because of physical strength or the strictness of training. It was the result of confidence and love for the game. The coach realized that what truly mattered wasn't just improving technique, but the inner state of each player. Jason continued to help the coach and the children, but he no longer intervened directly in the training. He had become a kind of mentor, leading by example but never imposing his style. The children felt that they could trust the coach, and that allowed them to open up. The long-awaited day of the championship arrived. It was the moment the team had been working toward all these months. But now, as they stood on the field, it was clear they were no longer the same players they had been before. Once they would step onto the field with a sense of fear and doubt, but today each one of them was confident in their role, ready to fight. Their faces reflected determination and confidence, the result of months of hard training and mutual support. The coach stood on the bench, watching the team. His heart was filled with pride. He saw how each player, including Max, who had once hidden behind others, and Sarah, who had always been afraid of making mistakes, now moved forward with determination. They had become a team, not just a group of players. He knew they were ready, and he was right. Jason, sitting in the stands, watched the game. He knew that his role was just a part of the journey. But it was his intervention at the moment when the children were on the brink of despair, when the coach couldn't find the right words, that had been decisive. He was proud to have helped them see their strengths, and now they were playing their best game. When the match ended and the team celebrated their victory, the coach approached each player to congratulate them. But when he reached Max, he stopped and said with special respect, "This is your victory. You did it because of yourselves, because of your belief in each other." The children hugged each other, exchanging congratulations. They hadn't just won. They had proven to themselves that they could be the best, not only in sports, but in life. The story concluded with the coach no longer being the person who broke his players, making them fear. He had become someone who supports, who inspires, and who helps them find their inner strength. And Jason, watching this moment, understood. True success isn't in victories, it isn't in trophies. It's in inspiring others to move forward, to believe in themselves, and to become the best versions of themselves.